Everyone who watches this video will likely agree that a pistol is a core component of one's EDC, or everyday carry. However, there does seem to be some debate if a pistol belongs on one's kit in the midst of a without rule of law type of environment. Both sides can provide logical reasoning supporting their stance, but is there a right or wrong answer? Well, the individuals with the most decorative combat experience and the individuals who can't think for themselves will both say mission dictates kit, and they're not wrong. But if you ask me, the majority of the population leans closer towards the latter end of that statement and simply parrots what they hear from their favorite influencer. Most of the time when I try to have a discussion about this topic, the individual in question will ask an endless amount of clarifying questions to basically backseat quarterback the entire scenario. And while information gathering is always wise, even the best of the best don't know 100% of the details before conducting an operation. Furthermore, while Minuteman can take proactive measures, they are largely a responsive defensive force. So you can be certain during an actual emergency, the details at the time will be muddy at best. Being well-rounded both in equipment selection, training, and personnel will likely be the key to a successful unit and individual. But before we get into the meat and potatoes,
I am the nation. I was born on July 4th, 1776, and the Declaration of Independence is my birth certificate. The bloodlines of the world run in my veins because I offered freedom to the oppressed. I'm many things and many people. I'm 200 million living souls and the ghost of millions who have lived and died for me. I'm Nathan Hale and Paul Revere. I stood at Lexington and fired the shot heard round the world. I'm Washington, Jefferson, Patrick Henry. I'm John Paul Jones, the Green Mountain Boys, Davy Crockett. I'm Lee, Grant, and Abe Lincoln.
I'm in the camp that a readily available pistol provides more benefits than downsides for the typical Minuteman, and as such, each of my kit setups has the capability to run a pistol in some form or fashion. Most arguments against running a pistol have their justifications rooted in military protocol, procedures, and examples to some degree, which, in all honesty, makes sense. After all, the Minuteman community, by and large, looks to the military doctrine and past conflicts to gauge what we may or may not need, both in equipment and in training. However, the two are not the same. Amongst other things, the military has a large logistical team, 3 to 10 times the size of their fighting force, allowing the unit as a whole to do things otherwise impossible to do in a sustainable format. Couple that with the military's ability to readily use and maintain weapon systems and explosive ordnances not available to civilian population, there will be many instances where the two doctrines don't line up. It is my opinion that the stance on personal sidearms is one of these differences. The justification behind my belief isn't focused on one aspect, but based on multiple factors that, when combined, provide more pros than cons when it comes to incorporating a pistol onto one's kit. Those factors are what we will be going over today, in an effort to aid each individual in making an informed decision. I would like to remind everyone that most of the things we're going to be covering here today could be solved, so to speak, by having an ample amount of personnel and the Mary Poppins never-ending bag of equipment. Hence, one reason why I believe the military sees no need for their ground forces at large to carry handguns. That being said, a lot of the small team special forces do carry handguns when on deployment to this day, and historically, they have always been on the battlefield. Otherwise, how did our beloved 1911 get its legendary stature? Lastly, for whatever it's worth, I would like to say that I do have some form of bias in this matter. I have been shooting and training with pistols far longer than rifles, and I also view the pistol as the optimal tool for personal protection for multiple reasons. I also use and carry a pistol as a tool daily in my profession, which I've been doing for close to 15 years. So naturally, I'm very comfortable with the platform, or at least I should be. And I'm also a licensed firearms instructor through the NRA since 2017 for pistols and 2019 for rifles. And while I fully recognize my bias, I will do my best to provide objectively true statements for each individual to then weigh its worth. As a Minuteman, we are not preparing for one particular disaster or event, but instead training individuals to respond regardless of what unfolds, and they will need to be properly equipped to do so. Eventually, we will be faced with obstacles and objectives with very specific goals in mind, but initially, the fog of war, so to speak, will be thick. Having a small, compact, and relatively lightweight weapon system, always on one's person and ready for deployment at any given time, provides the operator with the most options. And since the Minuteman's job is the ability and willingness to respond to any situation or problem our respective communities have, having more options will ultimately prove to be a benefit to the operator and the unit. If you're watching this video, then chances are you've heard the phrase, 2 is 1, 1 is none, more than once while wargaming out your preparations. This is a common practice and mindset in our community and within the military itself. However, as soon as weapon systems come into play, individuals and groups will start to sing a different song. Most assume that if you buy a quality primary weapon system, then the need for a secondary one is unnecessary or unpractical, and carrying a spare bolt or bolt carrier group is sufficient. While carrying a spare BCG is wise, and I would highly encourage everyone to do so, this will not help the individual in the immediate aftermath of a parts failure. Given the fact that your firearm is going to fail, it will likely do so right after pulling the trigger. And couple that with the fact that knowing at this point in time you're likely only pulling the trigger at active threats. Depending on other factors, you may not have time or even have access to your spare BCG, given most people run them in their packs, and that just touches on one aspect of your primary going down. Another one that is guaranteed to happen given the environment we are talking about is your magazine runs dry. Reloading your primary is the preferred choice given there is enough distance and or cover between you and the threat. But when both those criteria are lacking, a pistol becomes real handy, real quick. And unless both your rifle and kit are specifically built and staged for speed reloads, coupled with a ton of training time in this area alone, which honestly we should all be doing, typically speaking, swapping to one's sidearm is considerably faster than reloading the rifle. The end goal is to always get that primary weapon system back up and running as fast as possible, and ideally, an individual will have a team there to provide cover during that time as well. Battlefields are a finicky space though, prone to confusion, disorientation, and just plain Darwinism. If something can go wrong, then there's a decent chance that it will. There's a fairly hard rule while out in the field to never be more than an arm's length away from your primary weapon system, which again, I would highly encourage everyone to practice. However, there may be times where one is separated from the rifle against the will of the user. This could come in a few different forms, but the most common one would likely involve the user falling down, either by accident or by force. Most of the time, this isn't the end of the world, and the user can simply pick it back up. But environmental conditions may make this difficult, delaying the action or making it impossible altogether. While this isn't the most common sight to see, it does happen. And if permanently lost or destroyed, the military even has a term for this called a combat loss. Although this covers a wide range of events, most of which that don't apply here. Regardless, it still shows the precedence for it actually taking place and should be considered when evaluating what events one may be faced when out in the field. Like everything else we have discussed, hand-to-hand engagements are not the most common sight to see on the battlefield, but there are more recorded accounts of it happening than one may initially think. According to a study completed in 2014, researchers analyzed 30 post-combat surveys administered to soldiers coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan from 2004 to 2008. Out of 1,226 soldiers, 216 reported using some form of hand-to-hand combat, which is about 19%. Now, to fully understand what that means, you really have to dig into the details, but if nothing else, it does confirm that they do happen in modern warfare. By now, I'm sure everyone here has heard about, if not seen, the Ukraine GoPro blade fight footage called 15 minutes of actual hand-to-hand combat. If you haven't, it's definitely worth the time. Although, be forewarned, it is brutal, giving you a glimpse into the non-sexy aspects of what conflict can really look like. Regardless, in that footage, it shows the soldier coming face to face with the enemy, which in turn led to 7 minutes of hand-to-hand combat, ultimately costing him his life. I wouldn't go as far as to say that this is a common occurrence, but I also don't believe that we just so happened to catch the only time of it happening on film. We also couldn't say for certain that if he would have had a pistol on his waist, would this fight have ended up any differently, but it likely would have increased his odds tremendously.
And may the odds be ever in your favor.
I could see the typical Minuteman being faced with events that would require both hands for administrative tasks, or leave only one hand available for defense. Typically, if an operator is using both hands to complete a task, then they likely have hands on or at least near some third-party object. This could be another person, piece of equipment, structure, you get the picture. Now, depending on what exactly is going on, it could prove problematic for the operator to engage a threat via rifle should one present itself. Medics, even though they don't typically carry handguns in the military, would be a good example of this. consistently using their hands for tasks other than fighting while still having the ability to gauge a threat should the need arise. Ideally, the medic would have an ample amount of protection from his fellow squad, but if the team does not have that luxury, then the medic may have to loosely cover a sector of fire as he or she tends to the wounded. Sustaining an injury while in the field may also lead to the operator only having access to one hand. This could be from the operator sustaining an injury or perhaps a teammate needing assistance due to a limb being damaged. Ideally, in this type of situation, other squad mates would be doing all the defensive work while the injured was moved out of immediate danger. However, personally, when wargaming out something, I like to assume things will be, well, less than ideal. Getting the injured to cover as quickly as possible is the focus, and trying to keep any weapon system up and ready while helping the injured off the field will likely only slow one down. However, again, depending on the immediate surroundings, it may be necessary. If the operator himself becomes injured to the point to where operating a rifle system is out of the question, well, for one, good luck, because you're probably fucked. But on the off chance that you're not, having the ability to defend yourself from further harm while making your evac could prove to be beneficial in the long run. There are many more reasons why one may need a weapon system able to be operated with one hand, but I think everyone has gotten the idea. For now, let's look at confined spaces. This may get a little old, but again, everything is situational. Depending on the immediate surroundings of an operator, it may be extremely difficult or impossible to traverse certain areas while deploying a rifle. Narrow corridor layouts with sharp turns like one may find in submarines and maintenance passageways could prove difficult to move about while keeping your rifle at a high ready, but still likely possible with proper technique and training. However, if the infrastructure has any damage or decay, that could change things a bit. Smaller tunnels and crawl spaces typically require the user to drag their rifle behind them, cradle it as they crawl, or toss it in front of them little by little, if they wish to continue down that particular path. Perhaps an individual or unit just wants to check and make clear a small tunnel, crawl space, or a trench cave, but the surrounding environment doesn't allow for one to get a rifle into the opening safely. Generally, the answer here is
surprise grenade.
Always a surprise grenade.
at least from what we have seen from the military anyhow. But the civilian population may or may not have access to explosives. Blind fire into said area is also an option we regularly see used, often in combination with a
Surprise grenade.
but again, depending on the surrounding environments and available angles, getting a muzzle of a rifle into those nooks and crevices may or may not be possible. Climbing a ladder would be another instance where the environment may force one to sling their primary weapon system momentarily. I don't know about you, but if it has gotten to the point where I have donned on kit and taken up rifle for the sake of my family or community, I'd feel a whole lot better about climbing a ladder to the unknown with a pistol in my hand versus just my hopes and dreams. Drones can and should be used as a primary method to aid the user on acquiring visuals on difficult areas such as these and many more. However, in my case, I have access to only one of them. If and when it gets destroyed or damaged due to a hostile, spicy care package, or just piss poor driving on my end, I am now without a means to clear said areas. All that being said, you will be hard pressed to get my big ass into one of these areas if it can be avoided, but there may be times where I get little vote in the matter. While I'm unsure of the likelihood of this next one actually occurring, I do believe it to be a possible scenario we may be faced with, and perhaps even a powerhouse move given the right environment. While the idea of ditching or stashing one's loadout is never a sexy one, it may be necessary in order to evade pursuing hostiles in efforts to blend in with the surrounding local population. Having the ability to remain lethal at a distance during that time would be ideal if at all possible. Carrying a pistol in one's ruck while on the surface seems like it would be suitable for this purpose, except that upon first contact with a hostile force, dropping one's pack or rucksack as protocol for most teams and groups. And if shit has gotten so far south that we are considering ditching our equipment in attempts to blend in with the nearby population, then chances are we wouldn't have time to go digging in our pack. Having it on your person at all times is the only way to take advantage of this possibility, which again, I'm unsure the likelihood of it actually happening. Apart from the Red Dawn scenario, having a pistol on a kit that was built for recon may yet still prove useful specifically for the American MinuteMan. Depending on the situation as always, it could be completely feasible for one member of the recon team to leave their LBE equipment with Overwatch or stage it nearby and take only their pistol concealed with them, allowing for the operator to complete reconnaissance much closer to the target under the cover as a civilian or enemy if the group is large enough, all while remaining armed. And while sneaking out of a tree line and stashing one's kit in a bush may sound very 007-ish, it could also be as boring as a kit remains in a vehicle while the operator is doing whatever is relative to the area nearby. When I say the term battlefield handoff, chances are most individuals start picturing a scene from Call of Duty or some blockbuster from the past 40 years. And while a battlefield handoff is another one of those topics that seems like it's more common in Hollywood than on the front lines, as we dig deeper into all the considerations, it may very well be an actual likelihood, granted still relatively small. With limited personnel being a potential concern, the possibility that a non-combative will have to temporarily take up arms for defense starts to become more likely. Depending on the situation and conditions at the time, handing off a sidearm to a family, friend, team member, or perhaps even a stranger, could provide the operator with more options during a difficult situation. Touching back to the 2-as-1 topic, your primary weapon system may be the best that money can buy, and as such will absolutely 1000% never break on you. But what about the guy standing to the left and right of you? Is everyone in your squad running equipment and components of equal stature? And if so, does everyone maintain the same level of care on said equipment? Chances are in every group, there's at least one budget baller or ex-Marine that, given enough unsupervised time, would manage to break anything and everything he gets his hands on. Now, I wouldn't carry a sidearm just for the possibility of one of my homies shit breaking. However, it is another possibility one could be faced with, adding another component for the total consideration. Moving on, vehicles in some form or fashion will likely find their way into the Minuteman operations at some point in time. You know, unless some sort of crazy EMP solar event takes place, disabling all vehicles. But even then, I give it, 72 hours before some backwoods gang tricks out a fucking lazy boy or something with a few belt feds and dons the era of Mad Max. With proper planning, equipment, and technique, one's rifle can be deployed and or retrieved in and out of a vehicle somewhat quickly. However, unless the operator's equipment is specifically chosen for this task, or they have a large amount of consistent training specifically around vehicle operations, then this process can be a bit clunky. Pistols, on the other hand, being a much smaller platform, are able to be maneuvered with much greater ease in a confined space such as a cab or a truck, and remain on your person while it's in operation, where an individual's rifle will likely be deslung and staged in an area that makes sense based on the relative location of each operator inside of the vehicle. If for whatever reason things go south, this little detail could be a major problem. Again, depending on the circumstances. If the vehicle crashes or has to come to an abrupt stop, is that rifle still quickly accessible? If you turn down the street and find yourself surrounded by unknowns, can you get that rifle up and maneuvered into position? Let's wargame out a small scenario together, just to help exercise the mind real quick. I'll put it into a story format to help make it more entertaining. However, the minuscule details are just that. It is sometime in the near future, and all over the news, social media, and other outlets have been reports of terroristic attacks taking place all over the country for the past 2 months. You're an individual living and working in a small to medium-sized town, and lately on your late-night drive back home from work, you've noticed an unusually large amount of activity 1 or 2 miles outside of the town's natural gas processing plant. One day on your way to work, you decide to take the back roads and attempt to see what exactly is going on. However, when you get close to the scene, the road has been blocked off by a vehicle with foreign writing scribbled on it. A group of men you've never seen before, speaking with a heavy foreign accent, tells you the road is closed and to leave the area immediately. As you glance towards the back of the group, you think you see what is the barrel of a rifle peek out from behind one of the individual's legs, all while he looks to be holding something behind his back. Not knowing exactly what is going on, you turn around and head to work. The next day, you attempt the same thing again, only to be met with the same results. But this time, you head to the local police department afterwards to inform them of what has been happening. For one reason or another, the police department shows very little interest in the matter, possibly due to laziness, stretched resources, or something else entirely. After speaking about these events with your buddies Rick and Morty, they decide to test their luck on a different set of back roads, only to be met with a more hostile reaction from a different set of individuals, this time clearly presenting 2 AK-47s to emphasize their point. Due to growing concerns for the community, a team meeting and some Google Earth reconnaissance took place, after which the group had decided a closer look at what exactly was going on there was necessary. Rick's father-in-law has some undeveloped land bordering right up to where all the activity has been taking place. About 3 miles from there is an old rundown abandoned house where the group plans on parking the vehicle and making a short rut to what will be a forward observation post. A drone and some decent binoculars will be more than enough to get a better idea of what exactly is going on. The 3 guys couldn't think of a single reason foreigners with AKs would be blocking off this area. The following day, in the glow of the midnight moon, the group put on all their equipment, loaded their rifles and backpacks into the Jeep, and set out to their destination. About 1 mile out from the old house, you see what looks to be a stalled vehicle on the side of the road as you drive, which was noticeably odd given the remoteness of the back dirt roads. Not long after passing the van, you see the headlights of it turn on and begin driving down the road, quickly gaining speed. Bad vibes fill the cab, and just as the group starts to discuss the nature of the van and its possible intentions, the Jeep hits something sharp in the road, sending it into a nearby ditch. The group, a bit disoriented but largely okay, hears some screeching tires and rolling doors slide open. Immediately, 3 men with cheap Chinese AKs smoking cigarettes start making their way towards the disabled vehicle. Morty, being alone in the back seat, was able to get his 16-inch AR up and aiming towards the back window surprisingly quick, perhaps due to the fact that he had a decent amount of room in the back and was already on edge about the whole ordeal. However, he can't see much due to the dust from the crash filling the air. You and Rick had just stabbed the airbags that were deployed when you hear Morty call out from the back, "Guys, I think they have guns." Blood begins to race in everybody as they comprehend what was unfolding. Rick started frantically grabbing for his rifle, which at this point had gotten lodged under the seat somehow due to the crash. Your rifle, a 20-inch AR-10 chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor, had only shifted a small amount, but now it lays under your feet and the floorboard. Even if you manage to reach it, the size of the platform, combined with the limited space the driver's seat of a Jeep has to offer, you'd be hard-pressed to get that rifle up and ready even in ideal conditions. But what other choice do you have? As you reach for the buttstock, you're stopped by the seatbelt still safely secured. Fuck. As you click the latch of the seatbelt, you see a large dark figure through the driver's side window, blocking the headlights of the van. The figure raises up his arms, holding something to his face. Then, the last thing you see is a flash. 7.5 hours later, a train derails 3.5 miles from their location and slams into the town's gas refinery, causing the largest explosion on U.S. soil since 1916, where, during World War I, German spies ignited 2 million pounds of munitions on Black Tom Island. While the overall story I just laid out was completely fabricated, and perhaps a bit stretched for some folks, the underlying details are very plausible, and there are some general considerations I was attempting to highlight. Vehicles are a huge asset for any team, but like everything else, there is no free lunch. Unless equipment is specifically chosen, being able to defend oneself from an outside force while inside of a vehicle is difficult, even under ideal conditions. Having a sidearm on one's person while a vehicle is in operational use would give the operator the ability to return fire fairly easily should the worst come to pass. Simply having the tool with little to zero time behind it does little to aid the user in the event any of these possibilities come to pass. Pistols are much harder to be efficient with compared to your standard AR-15, and as such, require consistent training to develop the skills and muscle memory or neurological pathways to stay sharp.
Angels on shoulder. No, I think personally,
Just as one trains the body, we also need to train and exercise the mind. Being able to recognize unconventional opportunities as they present themselves and have the capability to act on them will be an essential skill set the Minuteman will have to develop. Even though I find the carrying of a pistol on one's kit to be a very wise choice, I also believe an individual needs to meet the minimum equipment standards for a Minuteman rifleman. I do not believe a pistol is worth carrying if it means your rifle magazine capacity is under 8. Or forces you to only run 1 liter of water as an example. There will be individuals and teams who may agree with most, if not everything I stated here, and yet still believe the pistol has no place on the Minuteman's kit. While I disagree with their final conclusion, I can also understand and somewhat agree with the justification behind said conclusion. There will also be folks who disagree with everything I've stated here, and think I'm living too much in fantasy land, to whom I say, tell me why in the comments section below. Honestly, I want to hear it. And if you agree with me, let me know how you run your pistol on your setup. Or better yet, show me and the rest of the community. Take a picture of your setup, tag me in it, and post it on Instagram with the hashtag #BattlefieldPistol. I would love to see how everyone tackled that problem. Be sure to like the video, guys, and share it with your community. Until next time, this is Rebel Spirit Operations, and I'm out.